Evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you're at. Welcome to Reclaiming Space, a conversation series with Native political leaders. And so, our guest today is Representative Jennifer Jermaine. And to give a little bit of background about why we are doing this is through Advanced Native Political Leadership. And what it is, it's a project created to address the need for increased Native American representation in elected and appointed offices throughout the country. And I am currently in office. I am representing the 103rd District, Wichita, Kansas. I'm in the Kansas House of Representatives. And my name is Dr. Ponka-We Victors-Cozad. I'm from the Tohono O'odham Nation and Ponca tribe of Oklahoma. I am completing my 12th year, sixth term in the Kansas House. And so, what I would like to see is more Native representation on all levels of government. And that's exactly what Advanced Native Political Leadership is doing as far as offering training and getting ready for our next Native, preparing our next Native leaders, whether that be on city council, state legislatures, county level, congressional level, whatever the case may be. So, and let me shoot you this statistic. So, according to 2020 US Census data and our own research, Native Americans, Alaska Native, Native Hawaiian people make up just 0.03% of elected officials, whereas we represent at least 3.4% of the total US population. So, see, that right there in itself definitely needs to change. We definitely need to see more people like us at the table when important decisions are being made. So, let me tell you a little bit about our guest that we have today. Representative Jennifer Jermaine from the Arizona House. She represents District 18. She is a member of the White Earth Nation, and she's a graduate of ASU. She is the chair of the MMIW Investigating Committee, and she's co-chair of the Community and Legislative Partners and Aging Committee. So I want to thank Representative Jermaine for joining us today, and I would also like to introduce my colleague, Representative Christina Haswood. She represents District 10, I believe, Lawrence area in Kansas, and so right here, Native women, representation. And so I want to thank my colleague for joining me today. And we are going to uh, give a little interview with Jennifer and find out a little bit more about her and why she ran for office, because we all have different stories. And so I can't wait to hear her background and her stories as well. And so I will hand it off to Representative Haswood.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. So let's just jump into the first question. What was the moment or thing that made you want to run for office?
Oh my goodness. And thank you both so much for having me today. And thank you to everybody who's watching. The moment where I heard President Obama in my head going, "Why not you?" was when we were, a couple of my girlfriends and I were sitting in the House Appropriations Committee meeting in the audience. We all had brand new babies and we were just sitting there, and they started voting on defunding our public school system. And as a mom, that was just like a wake up moment going, whoa, 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 wait a minute. If you take away public schools, who is going to educate the children? If you take all the money out of our public schools, our schools have fixed costs. So in Arizona, a lot of that is energy costs. it costs a lot of money to run air conditioning when it's 120 degrees outside. So looking at how much money is going to be pulled out and seeing that we already have class sizes that are 35 to 40 students per class, going how much larger are these classes going to be? And this is going to affect my kid and my friend's kid and every other kid in the state of Arizona. And really saying, this is defunding the future of Arizona. It's pulling all of the public investment out of public schools, and we can't stand for this. And that was really the moment where I stood up and said, you know what, I can do this. And I took on an incumbent challenger and ran for office.
That is an amazing story. You saw the issue right in front of your eyes, and you just knew that you needed to be there and that you could do the job. Baby hand and all. As Native women can do it all like that. That is just so awesome. And I guess, I think a lot of folks, when they are going to run for office, they feel like they need, a special degree, a law degree, even though if you have a law degree, that's good. But you don't need that to run for office. I always tell folks it's, I think, basically just an age requirement and that you live in the residency that your district is. Can you tell us a little bit about your background before running for office?
Yeah, I've spent the last 20 years working in nonprofits, mostly on policy and advocacy sides, and a little bit on the fundraising side. So I knew how to raise money. But really, I'm a policy wonk through and through. I have a master's in public administration from Arizona State University and a bachelor's in international finance from San Diego State University. So making sure that when we're looking at crafting policy, we're looking at everybody that gets affected by that policy. So I had some idea of what I was getting myself into.
So I have the next question, Representative.
Yeah.
And my question is, can you tell us a little more about your legislative background? Where is your district and what committees do you serve on?
Yeah, my district is in Central Maricopa County, which is the central county in the state of Arizona. My district includes the Ahwatukee portion of the city of Phoenix, half of the city of Chandler, half of the city of Tempe, and a quarter of the city of Mesa. And through redistricting, next year, this district is also going to include the Maricopa County portion of the Gila River Indian community. So we're picking up part of the tribal nation, mostly where all the casinos are. There aren't very many people that live there, but it's a huge economic development area for the tribe.
Amazing. And what committees do you serve on right now?
Right now, I serve on the Government and Elections Committee, and then I serve on Public Safety and Military Affairs and Veterans Affairs. And I'm also in the interim session we're in right now. I am chairing the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Committee.
Me and Representative Haswood, we worked on an MMIP bill together, and it got signed in 2021. And it's basically to train law enforcement about the MMIP issue in Kansas, and it was actually put into effect last year, or no, wait, this year, I believe, this summer. And so me and Representative Haswood were at the table when they were crafting the training. And so I'm so happy for that, but that's just like a foot,
Yeah.
in the door. We still, well, now Representative Haswood still has a lot more work to be done. And it's so important, I noticed a big change, like as being the only Native in the Kansas legislature, and then Representative Byers coming in, and our other colleague and Representative Haswood, like it made things a lot easier as far as educating my colleagues about these issues that we know about. But, sometimes the communities outside our areas, they don't understand or know that this is going on, that we could be statistics as far as missing. And so I was curious, like, in the Arizona legislature right now, how many, how big is your Native American caucus?
Right now, there's 7 of us. So we have 3 people who are Navajo, myself, who's Ojibwe. Senator Steele is Seneca and Mingo, and Representative DeGrazia is Eastern Band Cherokee.
So are they all going to be elected back? Because I know you're going to be leaving.
Yeah,
So
I'm
how
going
many will?
to be leaving, but we will have at least 3 members when they return, because we will still have our 3 representatives from the Navajo Nation.
So we started out with 3 too this past year, but now it's down to Christina, our Representative Haswood. So we need to grow her Native caucus again, so that, you know, when these kind of issues happen, that we can, you know, have a strong voice.
Yeah.
So I hand it off to Representative Haswood. She has the next question.
I also want to add on to that point that here in Kansas, we get about 3 committees. I'm on 4, but one's kind of on call, and Arizona is probably the same. Where in the House, you have over 30 committees, and there's no natives on the Senate side, which runs into a lot of issues for us. I saw my first term that is, you know, they had no knowledge of Indigenous law. And we had to quickly put the fire out on the House side. There was a couple times where we had to go to the governor's office and sit her down, and have our tribal leaders come. And, you know, things would just be a little bit more smoother if we had folks in office. And again, you know, only 4 committee assignments for me. I'm not even on some big committees like education. You know, and infrastructure and tax. I'm always saying, you know, we need more folks in office, so we can tackle these issues when they first come into the legislature. Have you kind of seen that disparity in the Arizona legislature?
Yeah, quite a bit. And I would say to people who are urban natives, don't be afraid to run. Don't be afraid because you're not from a tribe in the state where you're running. Because urban natives need a voice in the legislature as well. And you can be a voice for the tribes in your area. One of the biggest things that I've been able to advocate for is the extension of our tribal gaming compact, which brings the money in that funds all of our tribal governments. So making sure that we're putting our voices and using our voices to elevate those around us.
Very, very good point. So on to our next question.
Yeah.
What bills have you passed or supported that you are proud of?
Oh man, I went through and made a list because first of all, the establishing of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Committee. I think we were the second to be established throughout the nation. Washington beat us by a couple weeks. From our first interim session with that committee, we were able to pass a brand new missing children statute here in the state of Arizona. So there is no longer a wait to report a missing child to law enforcement. And there is no reason why law enforcement can decline to investigate. They absolutely must investigate when a child goes missing, and a child is defined as anybody under the age of 18 years old or somebody with a developmental disability under the age of 26. We pushed through reforms to protective orders. So now an emergency protective order will last for 7 days instead of 72 hours. And in our rural counties, you can obtain those orders through a telephone call. You don't have to drive yourself all the way down to the county seat to be able to get an emergency protective order. And our permanent protective orders are good for 2 years instead of 1 year. And that allows victims to have to appear less in court and have to face their attacker less. We created a program There's a program under the University of Arizona Medical School called the Arizona Health Education Centers, which does continuing education for all kinds of healthcare professionals and social workers. So we went through and tweaked the charter. So now they can provide that continuing education and support to Indian healthcare, Native healthcare, Section 638 healthcare, and to the VA Center. One of the things that we found was that outside of metropolitan Phoenix and the surrounding suburbs, and outside of metropolitan Tucson and the surrounding suburbs, we had very few sexual assault nurse examiners to provide the proper forensic exam when you present to the emergency rooms so that prosecutors can use it as evidence in a case. So we're working with the University of Arizona to try to expand out that training to our rural areas. We got Native funerals approved under the State Victim Compensation Fund. So they will now reimburse families of victims of violent crime for a traditional Native funeral. We partially codified ICWA into state law, making sure that tribes have a primary voice at the table when a child from their community goes into foster care. And to tie that in, we increased the kinship care stipend to be equal to foster care. So now there is no longer any difference. Previously, foster care families were getting about $375 a month per child that they took in, and kinship care families were getting $75 a month. So now that is equal, and kinship care gets $375 as well as foster care, and those two are tied together for any future increases. We got state funding for the very first time for tribal domestic violence nonprofits. So these are the people who are doing the work on the ground in our tribal communities, working with victims. We got funding for the first time for tribal housing programs to be able to deal with some of the homelessness and some of the other problems that lack of housing creates. We got $2 million for our Attorney General to establish an Office of Missing and Murdered Indigenous People and to deal with some of the new issues that the Castro Herrera Supreme Court case is going to cause. And that also will help us expand out victim navigators throughout the entire state to help victims walk through the judicial process. We've increased funding for school counselors and social workers to be able to help children and help families who are going through the loss of a loved one. And we, in addition to the federal infrastructure money that's coming in, we set aside quite a bit of state money for expanding high-speed internet service and cell towers out to rural communities. So we're working really hard with our tribes. We already have the approval to be rolling out the FirstNet program, which would allow every corner of Arizona to be able to dial 911 when there's an emergency. We actually still have pockets of Arizona that have no 911 service, but making sure that every person in our state has the ability to call 911 when there is an emergency and they need help. We got mobile vote centers created. So those are in use right now in the Gila River Indian community and the Navajo Nation. And Tohono O'odham is going to start using them in this upcoming election in November. They got it approved by the Pima County Board of Supervisors. So these are mobile polling sites, early vote sites that basically drive around our rural communities and set up on certain days and certain times in certain areas that are posted well ahead of time so people can come out and vote early. We got Miranda rights for minors. Prior to 3 days ago, law enforcement could question your child for 7 hours without notifying you. And we fixed that. We created a funding mechanism for tribal community colleges through our specialized license plates. So now you can buy a specialized license plate and have proceeds go to tribal community colleges. And we funded a brand new environmental lab at Navajo Technical University. And we got a veterans cemetery built in northern Arizona between Flagstaff and Tuba City area, so that it would be closer to our tribal communities for people to be able to bury their loved ones in a veteran cemetery. So those are some of the really great things that we got, in addition to expanding our tribal gaming compact for another 20 years. So I think 4 years in the State House, and we've definitely made a difference. And it wasn't just me, it was our entire community that came out to advocate for these things. And it was community members stopping members of the legislature in the stairwell and saying, can I tell you my story of why this is important to me? Why this is important to my rural community? Why this is important to my clan? And it makes a difference. It makes a big difference.
Even your Zoom background.
Yes. Yeah. So for those of you who are watching, I'll put my camera down so you can see it. This was from the day that we passed the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Committee. And I think there was a moment in one of the recent episodes of Reservation Dogs where Willie Jack was praying and all of her ancestors were behind her. And it really, truly felt like that moment. And my colleague, Representative Turan, took this photo, and you can't really see it in the faded photo, but the lights are shining down. And there's a little bit of dust flowing in the air, so you can really see kind of, it's a beautiful, beautiful photo that she took. And behind me in the gallery is our Native community, all standing in red.
That is so powerful. You know, even with our Missing More Indigenous Peoples bill, we had students from Haskell, from KU, mothers, daughters. It really makes a big difference if you can come to the Capitol. And you passed. I'm like speechless. You got a lot done. You said in 4 years.
Yeah. And one thing that's unique about our Missing and Murdered Committee is that we're taking the legislature into the tribal communities. So we've got a meeting on October 14th in Sells, Arizona. And this is like the first time that the legislature has held a formal official meeting in Sells, Arizona.
Wow. We need to follow up on offline on how to do that.
Yeah.
That's impressive. Wow. And like, I guess pinpoint maybe a couple bills you might want to go in a little detail about. How did you make that happen? Can you talk a little bit more about what it took to accomplish that? I think for me as a newbie legislator, I always have to remind myself a lot of things were in motion for like 5+ years, and I'm just pushing across the finish line. You want to talk about a couple of your bills?
Exactly. When I came into the legislature, former Representative Winona Benali, who came out of the Navajo Nation, and she's now a prosecutor for the Pasco Yaqui Nation down in Tucson. She had started working on Missing and Murdered. And she had started the community meetings, and she had started the stakeholder meetings. So when I came in, she called and said, I'm leaving, but would you carry this forward? Would you keep working on us? So I'm standing on the shoulders of the women who came before me. And really, we would not be here today had she not done that initial groundwork. And she has been here every step of the way, pushing forward and helping to advocate for these bills. So, and even when we leave legislative office, sometimes the office doesn't leave you. You keep getting asked to come back and to speak on things and to educate your colleagues about things. But really, it's taken a lot of one-on-one conversations with my colleagues. And I got quite lucky my very first year. So I walked into the speaker's office and I said, I understand that I'm a freshman member of the minority party, but if you only give me one hearing on one bill this year, please let it be missing and murdered Indigenous people. And it turned out that, our speaker had an encounter with this when he was a young man on his mission. And he had a friend who was from the Yavapai Prescott tribe who went missing and was found murdered. And all it takes is that one connection. And he became our biggest champion for making sure that we were shining a spotlight on this and making sure that we had the access to the policy staff and to anything we needed to be able to move this issue forward and to really bring it to light. So it's finding that somebody who may not necessarily be an obvious ally, but it takes those personal conversations to be able to do that.
That is exactly right. I know I was Christina's mentor, or Representative Haswood's mentor. And I said, when you enter this Capitol, don't think of yourself as either or, the party, or we're not supposed to talk to. I said, get to know each one, get to know each legislator, where they're from, their families. I said, because I believe that we all love our state and we all want to help. And like I said, it takes a little more for us to educate our colleagues on these big issues like MMIW and whatnot. And I've shared data and newspaper articles, and then it's kind of like, wow, I had no idea, how can I help, kind of thing. And I've had friends and people in my family who've gone missing, and whatnot. And I stressed Representative Haswood, try to, you just never know, like you said, who your ally might be, who's going to have your back when you least expect it. And so I always give everybody a fair shot, and sure enough, that's how it's worked for us. And so very thankful, very blessed, because in Arizona, in Kansas, you can't get anything done unless you're willing to work across the aisle. We just don't have the numbers. And so anything we do, like with the Attorney General on the MMIW issue, I remember calling his office, talking to his people, this is what's needed. And KBI stood up and was like, yeah, this was an issue at our national conference we had. And so when it came time to do the hearing, they were there and they stepped up. And I'm so thankful because, representation matters. And when we all showed up in that committee room, it was yeah, this is important to our community and to our people. And so kudos to you for understanding that. And I'm so glad you could echo that to Representative Haswood that, that it's out there. You really have to you have to work with everyone if you want to be an effective leader.
Yeah, and really one of the things that was kind of thrown back at us quite a bit was, well, where's the data? And our whole argument was, well, the data doesn't exist because our databases are not built to hold this data. So that was one of the other great things that came out of this was we built a long-term partnership with Arizona State University and created the Research on Violent Victimization Lab, which Rep. Haswood is an alumni of the American Indian Policy Institute, and they are part of our partnership, and they're building model policy that can be rolled out to other states. So definitely make sure you're giving Dr. Morris a call. when those policies come up, because she's happy to share them with you guys. But we're really building what can be used as a national model for how to create data from existing sources, and to really, we've got social workers who've been trained and in live human interview processes, and they've been trained by Hung Wednesday Consulting, which is out of the Hopi Nation, on how to interview tribal members, and going through and getting tribal council approval to go into communities and interview survivors, interview family members about what worked and what didn't work, and what did you wish you had when all of this happened to your family. How can we make it better? How can we stop this from happening in the first place? And I think it's the first time our communities have felt like anybody's listened to them and anybody's intentionally sought out their comments.
Thank you so much, Representative, for that. Thank you. It's kind of always like when you tell people you're a legislator, they don't really understand what you really truly do. And this is right now, this is the work that we do. And so thank you for that overview, and congratulations on all the hard work that you've done in the Arizona House. My next question is, there are many obstacles you are faced with when deciding to run for office. When recruiting Native folks specifically to run for an elected position, what are some common barriers that make them say no? And how did you handle those barriers? How can they overcome those barriers? What's your word of advice for that?
Oh my goodness. The hardest one is that as Native people, we're raised not to self-promote and center ourselves. And it was really hard to overcome that. And I find even now, I like to give credit where credit is due, and none of these accomplishments are mine alone. It was an entire community of people working in the background, and I just happened to be the person holding the microphone. So it takes a village, it takes a clan to push all of this forward. But that was the hardest thing for me, was when I would go to fundraising call time and fundraising events to speak about myself, because we're just taught not to do that. So one of the things that I've started doing here in Arizona too is making sure that our youth have the opportunity and the access to work on political campaigns before they're the age of running for office, so that they're prepared when time comes to hit the ground running and to really take these on. So I was so excited to have 5 Native youth working on my campaign this cycle, and really making sure that we are opening those opportunities up to the community, and intentionally seeking out people who are not traditionally offered those positions to work on those campaigns.
That's awesome, because I always say my first time working on a political campaign, like officially door knocking and all that, was my campaign, and kind of wish I did something before. And I don't come from a political family at all, but it's really cool to see like families get involved like that.
Mm-hmm.
What did your youth think about that when they were working on your campaign? I think another thing too is when I have Indigenous youth, like I think we're just so instilled to take care of our communities and not to run for office. So I'm like, you can do both.
Yes, you can very much do both. And they were excited. They were excited to learn. They were excited to grow. These young people are I am so excited for when they become the candidate. because they're smart and they're so inquisitive, and they think outside the box, and they pull from all areas of knowledge, and they know things that I don't know. I've got one of my young ladies who worked on my campaign has 2 million followers on TikTok. I don't know how to do that. I don't even know how to set up a TikTok account. But it was awesome to learn from her how to like really target on social media and how to create a following. But that's incumbent upon us too to be willing and open to learning from our youth, because they come from a different generation and a different background, and they have knowledge we don't have, and we have knowledge they don't have. So it's very much a give and take, and I'm so excited for these young people because they're going to be spectacular.
Can you go more into so I know like there's so many barriers to running the office. I mean, with younger folks, it's like I'm still in school or I'm just
Mhm.
starting my career and I can't, even we work in states as state legislators that don't pay a very attractive salary. It's a lot of commitment. I
Yes.
guess what with all these barriers stacked against you, what made you file for reelection or how'd you ever overcome these barriers?
Yeah. I mean, I financially, we got a little bit lucky because my husband got a really great job offer at the same time that I was thinking about running for office. So the low pay was not as hard of a hit as it would have been. Um, but there are also creative ways that people are making money. I know one of our state senators has a jewelry line that she sells, and she makes jewelry in her off time and travels around to different markets, Indian markets, and sells them. Um, we've got another one who she's also a licensed tribal attorney, so she takes on some clients in the interim within her tribe to help cover the cost. But it's a financial sacrifice to sign up for a job that does not pay very much. But at least here in Arizona, for people who are coming from outside of Maricopa County, we did raise the per diem. So it equates out to be closer to $45,000 a year for people who are traveling in from outside of Maricopa County, just because they do need to be able to create two separate residences, and the cost of gas has gone up so much.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. And on to some great news about your next endeavor and just, what you're going to be doing in January. Can you tell us a little bit more about becoming a judge?
Yeah, so I am the incoming Justice of the Peace for the San Marcos District for the Maricopa County Justice Courts. And in January, there will be 5 Native women on the justice courts throughout the state of Arizona. So it'll be myself and Deborah Ann Begay here in Maricopa County, Victoria Steele and Sarah Mae Williams down in Pima County, and Susie Nelson is up at the Kayenta Court in Navajo County. So we're really excited. Prior to this election cycle, there was only 2 Native judges on the bench. So we're really, really excited to expand Native representation within our judicial branch, and to really expand that out through our county court systems.
Wow, history is being made, y'all. Look at Arizona. So you said a lot of title terms, even for me from Kansas, I'm like, I don't even know what this means. Can you tell us a little bit more about what this role does? What does it mean? Something that you'd break down to the average person.
Yeah, so our Maricopa County Justice Court is the court of jurisdiction for most misdemeanor offenses. It is also the court that handles the vast majority of protective orders. And it is the court that handles a lot of juvenile issues. So almost everything except for those that rise above a class 2 felony or juvenile issues would go to the county justice courts. So really making sure that we're building in safeguards for people who come file for protective orders, handing them lists of resources while they're filing, and saying, here are the groups that can help in your community. And making sure that when juveniles present to us, that we're giving them a fair shake and not creating a lifelong interaction with the justice system.
That's really great to have, this Indigenous voice on the justice piece. I was figuring out too, like as a legislator, you're making the laws, but on the judicial side, you're enforcing it and interpreting the statute laws that get passed. And, when you elect your judges here in Kansas, we have all of our judges on our ballots. And just to make sure that you are electing someone who has that values and that you can trust to bring justice and fairness to the courtroom. So important.
Yeah.
So I have the next question. And my question is, what advice would you have for someone looking to run for office?
Seek out training. And don't listen to the people who tell you to wait your turn. When I first ran for my seat, everyone said it was an unwinnable seat, and I won it by 7,000 votes. So if you see the ground shifting in your community, if you see the opportunity, don't listen to the naysayers. Get the training, and you know what? It doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot of people to run a political campaign. My first political campaign was 3 of us. And we knocked doors like crazy. So anything that you can do to get in front of your community, make personal contact with your community. In my area in Arizona, it's really door to door, getting to know people. My average election cycle, I'll knock about 30,000 doors. It's really, people want to see you show up. So when you're looking to run to office, make sure you're showing up. Make sure you're using your voice. And a good ground game will outrun lots of money. I had almost $500,000 less than my opponent, and I beat her by 7,000 votes. It was the largest margin of any incoming freshman that year.
Wow.
That is amazing.
That is, I think Advance offers our Native Leadership Institute that is training. And I know this wasn't really around when we were all running for office. So we're all kind of like, we would love to do this training.
Yeah.
If you're interested in running for office or just the slightest bit, go to advancednativepl.org/Native Leadership Institute on the website and sign up for a training that will be happening starting next year. We did get a full class cohort for this year, and just learning about all this, even door knocking, right? I ran during a pandemic, so we did a lot of phone calling. So now on my side time, I'm like learning how a field plan is created and cutting turf and like using all these software systems. I had one of my colleagues who's been in office for like 20 plus years, and she's like, I used to just, pick numbers from a phone book. And we were like, ma'am, the game has changed a little bit since the phone book days.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that was one of the greatest things for having Native youth on my campaign is I was able to teach them how to cut turf, how to target a walk list, how to create mailers, things that you don't really learn outside of being hands-on with a political campaign. But now they're able to also take that and go help other candidates. So two of my Native youth are now working on a school board campaign for another Native woman who's running in Central Phoenix and making sure that we're creating the opportunities and instilling that knowledge. And I think for those of us who are lucky enough to hold office right now, it's our job to hold the door open for other people to follow behind us and to make it easier for them to follow behind us. We've cracked the ceiling. Now we need to jam a stick in it and keep it wide open.
That is exactly correct. And so there you have it. You have no excuse not to run for office. Um, you have representation here that look like you. You have training. Go to the Advanced Native Political Leadership website, fill out that form, and sign up for training to run for office. And like Representative Jermaine said, don't let nobody tell you no, wait your turn, it's not the right time. No, don't, just do it. I did it. I just jumped in. I wasn't sure if I would last a year. Here I am 12 years. And the same way with Representative Jermaine, she's going on to the judicial side now. I liked Representative Haswood when she said we create laws and the judicial side enforces them. That is awesome. And so, like Representative Haswood, I just showed her the ropes and she took off. I mean, she's like a rock star on TikTok. And so follow her on TikTok. She just, I just gave her the resources and showed her what to do, and she like took off. Like you said, our youth, our younger generation is so smart. There's no reason to sit back and wait your turn. I started when I was 28, I believe, 29. And it is, I wish I would have had some type of training back then. I just got in like with not really knowing what to expect, but I did work on some campaigns. And so find a mentor, work on campaigns, even work for your local party, like doing mailers or putting stamps on mailers or whatnot. Just try to get your feet wet, and when you see an opportunity, go for it. So I think Representative Haswood has some the next question.
So on to a couple fun questions. What is your current favorite song?
Oh my goodness. I saw that question on the sheet and I was going, oh, my kid controls our Alexa jukebox. But when I want to like relax and like zone and clear my head, I usually put on some like Tony Duncan flute music and just kind of like mellow out and breathe.
That's great. I think it also depends on the mood. I remember like my first couple weeks, I was like, I want to get pumped up, and I'd be like listening to Beyonce and like all the way up to the chamber. And then I guess I can just wrap us up with the last question. What's the last movie you saw, or what you're most excited to see what's coming out soon? I know you mentioned Reservation Dogs, and I
Mhm.
just cried my eyes out during that scene. I think we all just felt that. But yeah.
I know, and I'm actually like so curious that Rutherford Falls got canceled. 'Cause I loved that show. I was like, oh, somebody gets me. But honestly, like the last movie I saw in the theaters was Frozen 2. And the last movie I watched on TV was Barbie Mermaid Power. So when you're a mom, your kid like controls a lot of your choices. So I get to watch Reservation Dogs for 30 minutes at night before I fall asleep after she goes to sleep. But um I don't get a lot of movies other that are my choice.
I'm the same way. I have a 1 year old, and it's all Coco Melon. That's all she watches, wants to watch, free time. So in between, like you said, I'll sneak in my series, my shows, because it's so important as leaders is to take a breath,
Yeah.
and watch just indulge in TV and get lost, for your own good, for your mental health. Go for a walk. Like you said, I never listened to flute music, so I might have to add that. I do listen to jazz a lot. Frank Sinatra too, just to kind of set the mood and get me into like work mode kind of thing. And then I do have my pump up music, like when I'm going into the Capitol, like,
Yeah.
okay, we're gonna do this today, like when we have hearings or whatnot. So but yeah, it is so important that when you and I always say, and I told Representative Haswood too, be sure to have date night, reserve some time where you're not looking at, because you get the emails, you get the calls. Sometimes you just have to regroup a little bit and refocus and take a break. Like, I'm not saying like a week, but
Yeah.
take like an evening off and just I did that, and celebrate the little victories. Like, sometimes I'll be like, if I do this, or if I did, I'm gonna go treat myself to a movie. I like to watch movies like by myself. I'll go to the theater by myself, and I'll get a big popcorn and whatnot, and I'll just enjoy the movie. And so I always say, like, that is so important when you're a leader, because you can just be consumed, and that can just become your whole focus in life. And then I feel like you burn out, like, when you're doing that. So you kind of need to just take a breather. And what are some other things that you do to kind of get your mind off of things? Because it can be stressful times too.
It can be. I do audiobooks. So especially like when I'm out canvassing and you get like 30% of people opening their doors, I'll put on an audiobook while I'm walking around. Um, I I'm lucky that we have such a supportive community in my area. Um, and there's always things to do. And quite honestly, I have my circle. I have my close circle of people that I can vent to, and that I can say, let's go get lunch. And then during the day, I've got a block on my calendar from 12:30 to 1, because I have invested 35 years into the bold and the beautiful. And sometimes you just need fake drama to make the real drama less crazy.
Exactly. Um, do we have any questions I want to say from the audience? Well, if not, then we'll just go ahead and wrap up here. Um, Thank you so much for joining us. This is awesome, and congratulations on your victory, and for coming in with 5 women that are also going to be with you in this new chapter in your life. And like, congratulations. And like I said, this is proof here that you can do it. If we can do it, you can do it too. And so with that, I'll go ahead and end, and thank you again, everybody, for joining. Have a good evening.